heard of the quintessential Australian stories and folklore? We've decided to share some of the lesser-known tales. These are the kind of tales that interest us. And if you're interested in the history of Australia, the more obscure stories about places and people you may not have heard of, then stay tuned and enjoy this new series, Aussie Tales That You Weren't Taught. This week's episode is The Witches of the Barossa and Adelaide Hills. Our first story begins in a town called Millandella, the First Nations word for Emu Creek, the creek that ran through the town. Or could it mean something more sinister? One interpretation from Tyndale Papers suggests it derives from Milan Tellen, Milan malevolent, and Tellen being frightened, referencing water on that creek. A creek cryptid? Another interpretation connects it to Milin, being a First Nations term associated with sorcery and revenge. Stories recorded by Reverend George Taplin, a minister who worked in Aboriginal missions in South Australia and gained a reputation as an anthropologist, as well as writing on the Nurrungeri law and customs, revealed the widespread and deep-seated dread of Milin among the Nurrungeri people, despite efforts to dissuade them from this belief. The legacy of these cultural and historical elements paints a vivid picture of Millandella's past, intertwining the experiences of early settlers and the rich traditions of the Aboriginal people. The belief in Milin involved elaborate rituals such as disguising oneself with white paint and enacting revenge through stealth and symbolic acts. With a heavy club in hand, an individual practicing Milin would approach the target in silence, delivering a powerful blow to incapacitate the victim. He would then pull on the victim's ear, believing that this act would prevent the victim from identifying their attacker. Should the victim engage in the battle afterwards, it was thought that an evil spirit would whisper in his ear, rendering him defenseless, with his shield or causing misfortune such as encountering a deadly snake or succumbing to illness. Eventually the perpetrator of Milin would face retribution. The victim's relatives seeking revenge might kill the offender or even his brother, without discrimination to fulfill their need for justice. The fear of Milin was deeply ingrained, and no argument could dissuade the Nurrungeri people from their belief in this power. Reverend George Taplin noted this terror, describing it as a universal dread among the Nurrungeri. He explained that Milin was practiced exclusively by adult males and was regarded as the gravest crime an enemy could commit. Taplin recounted examples of the fear surrounding Milin. In one case, a boy and girl collecting wood for a white fisherman noticed two men painted with white streaks lurking nearby. Realizing the danger, the boy urged the girl to flee and ran as well. The men gave chase, catching and killing the girl with a club with a conical knob. The boy, narrowly escaping, managed to warn the camp, but when the women searched for the girl, they found her lifeless body. In another instance, two men angered by thefts from their fish enclosure caught a thief in the act. They pursued him, striking him with a barbed spear and stunning him with a club. After punishing him as per their customs, they left him unconscious by the water. Such incidents illustrate the pervasive influence of Milin. While the belief in sorcery tempted the Nurrungeri inclination for overt violence, encouraging them to seek subtle revenge, it has also perpetuated a culture of fear and fatalism. With European settlement came people from all over the world, especially with the spread of gold rush fever. Others simply for a better life. Millandella was established by German immigrant families in the 1880s. The Lutheran church, constructed in 1893, served as a central part of the community. What about the witches, you ask? Well, there are a few legends. One is that the German settlers that resided in Millandella believed that there were witches up in the mountains, along the eastern Mount Lofty ranges. The valley floor a natural path for carving a road, hugging closely to the witch's dwelling and winding along the contours of the hills. The tale itself follows a familiar pattern. On stormy, moonless nights, the witches would lie in wait for unsuspecting travellers. As their prey passed beneath, they would descend from their lofty perch, startling both the traveller and unfortunate horse. It became so that any bit of strife or mischief played was that of the witches. Problems with crops, finances, or a death in the family, it was the witches cursing you and yours. Any trouble was spoken to be that of those witches from the hills. The Adelaide Hills and surrounds are the ancestral lands and waters of the Nurrungeri, Peramunk and Kaurna peoples, with rich culture and traditions. The Peramunk, it is believed, had interaction with the European settlers, and the witches' legend was transferred from First Nations to the Germans' form of Hakasar. In Australia, most states up until the last few decades had a law stating that any person who pretends or professes to tell fortunes or uses any subtle craft, means, or device by palmistry or otherwise to defraud or impose on any other person, or pretends to exercise or use any kind of witchcraft, sorcery, enchantment, or conjuration, or pretends from his skills or knowledge in any occult or crafty science to discover where or in what manner any goods or chattel stolen or lost may be found, shall be guilty of an offence. So that basically covered everything. If you cursed anyone, pretending or otherwise, you'd probably go to jail. But that law has changed now. But more than actual witching, it seems it was the notion that someone was witching was enough to declare them a witch, much like Salem in the US and Pendle Hill in the UK. If you didn't like someone, you could simply nominate them as your local witch. A quick way to get rid of anyone. An 1853 story of German settler families, Hoffmann and Rissel, was a similar case to this. The Hoffmann family had a cattle and pig farm in the Barossa Valley, a town near Bethany. Their pigs had become sick and they couldn't work out how or why. The Rissels were a family next door, and their young daughter came to ask for butter, as often neighbours shared in times of need. The Hoffmanns obliged, gave the butter, and asked could her mother, Mary Ann Rissel, come and see them urgently. When Mary Ann Rissel arrived, the Hoffmanns' husband, Gottfried, and his wife accused her of witching their pigs, and Gottfried attacked Mary Ann Rissel with a knife, cutting her many times in the arm and back. She witnessed him rub his hands together in her blood. He believed this cured him of the hex that she had placed on them and their pigs. Mary Ann managed to get away and call for help, to which Gottfried Hoffmann was sentenced to 5 years hard labour for his attack on Mary Ann. And Ebenezer and St Kitts, two quaint towns in the Barossa Valley, originally settled by Wendish immigrants. The Wends, a Slavic people from Lusatia in southern Germany, known for their mystical nature, they adopted Lutheranism and Catholicism due to German influences, but retained their magical beliefs. Despite mistreatment and instances of enslavement, they preserved their traditions and in 1851 brought them to South Australia, founding towns like Ebenezer, St Kitts, Dutton and Neukerst. Some Wendish families in Ebenezer reportedly own the 6th and 7th Book of Moses, believed to contain spells for healing, invoking spirits and breaking curses. Wendish superstitions included wearing red ribbons to ward off magic and rituals. It seems a lot of the mythology, evil demons and legends of witches came across with the Wends people to Australia. A newspaper article from around that time mentions various names of evil entities that instilled fear in the people. Now, it's said that most of them were just to scare the kids so they wouldn't wander off at night. But how much of it was true? Some people believe that the more you believe in something, the more real it becomes. One enduring story from the late 1800s in Ebenezer tells of an elderly woman who was said to be cursed with immortality, unable to die unless she passed the curse on to another. Fearing the curse, townsfolk avoided her altogether. A similar tale suggested that those in possession of the books of Moses could not die until they passed the books on to someone else. These individuals, like the elderly woman, would continue to age but could not escape their fate. Additional Wendish magical beliefs in the Barossa included rituals to protect infants from becoming the will-o'-the-wisp. This involved the child's godmother stepping over an axe or broom when entering the church for the baptism. It was also believed that witches could shapeshift, become disembodied souls, and control animals, particularly black dogs and cats. These enduring beliefs reflect the Wendish blend of spirituality and mysticism. Such tales likely aimed to deter interest in witchcraft. In yet another story, 1874, a family moving into a house near the Cadena mine discovered unusual items in the chimney. 2 bottles containing water and pins, along with a bullock's heart stuffed with pins. These were believed to be protective charms to ward off witchcraft, preventing magical forces from entering the home through the chimney. I believe that the Irish immigrants that came across in the convict time also did similar things, particularly hiding things in the wall cavities in the houses they were in. And then there were the witches of Harndorf. In 1840s, there were 2 witches in the town, one a white witch and one a dark witch, meaning dark magic. They both fought each other within the township, and the people of the town were fairly scared of both of them, as you would be. To ensure that they weren't harmed by either witch, they would do such things as wearing their clothes inside out, the red ribbons much like the Wens people, tying red ribbons around their hair and necks, as well as planting bay trees outside of their homes. It was well known these 2 witches didn't like each other, as they would use the town for their magical skirmish. What a great town legend. Now, in the town of Harndorf, they did have a mural up in the German Arms Hotel, but the folks of today aren't too happy about that part of their history and have wiped it out completely. Which is a shame, because it is your history and, it's not a bad thing. It's quite an interesting thing, and I think it would make the town, really. It would be something that would bring tourism. But each to their own. One more little piece of info for you. Through his efforts to teach the Ngarrindjeri people literacy, numeracy and various trades, George Taplin in Millandella empowered them to adapt and briefly thrive within European society. His impact endures as many of the descendants continue to reside in communities across Australia, a testament to his influence. Among those he inspired were James Unaipon and his son David, whose legacy is still celebrated on Australia's $50 banknote. We hope you enjoyed this episode on the witches of South Australia, or Adelaide Hills and the Barossa. Stay tuned, because we've got many more Aussie tales you weren't taught.